trade had decimated the African population, but as that population came back, there was a new wave, a new
Definitely.
desire on the part of Europeans to do other things with
Definitely.
Africa, to enslave Africans on their own continent. I
Because at
think
the end of the slave trade, which was highly profitable, these European countries were looking almost immediately for a new way to bring in profit. And the Industrial Revolution came at a very, very great time, but there was a lack of workers and a lack of raw materials, both of which they decided they were going to get from Africa.
good, very good. And of course, Lana, what we'll do, we'll take our second commercial break, but I do want you to understand that I thought that the information that you gave in reference to that sort of highlighted it, and I'm pleased with the activity that you did in bringing that part of us together. But what I wanted to do with this final segment is to give you an opportunity to bring all of this information together and simply to talk about the impact that imperialism had upon the African continent. And I think that that'll be enough for us. And so we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Because sometimes I don't have anything to say in reference to it. So, pull it all together. Now, what the next show is?
Walker?
Walker, is that Walker?
What time do you think we'll be done? Around 2?
Around 2:30 or somewhere.
I gotta be at the church at 5, so we'll come home and then go back.
We have to roll it down. That's some time we didn't use, you know that.
Oh, I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
So you don't see it, but I can see it.
Yeah, I don't. I'm just going with the flow.
Yeah. Well, that's all right. On the wall? Okay.
You like that more? Is it gonna say we'll be right back? Like,
This is not the original.
no. Okay, so you know how we were having the problem that big thing was kind of cut off? Well, he just put another one up there, and so now you can see the full comments with Dr. James Haney. So do you want to keep that?
Yeah, let's keep that. Yeah, let's keep that. Okay, this is the last segment, 10 minutes. Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Alana McLaughlin, and she's given us some information in reference to the impact of colonialism and imperialism, Lana. had upon the African continent. And I think you gave us some excellent information in terms of laying out the conflict that we have to deal with. But let's take the last 10 minutes of this program to give you an opportunity to develop this idea of the impact and the reasons for some of the things that we're talking about here.
Now, one of the biggest effects of imperialism and colonialism on Africa was the loss of culture. There was this idea that the Europeans had that, oh, we're the smartest and the most able people in the world, and so everybody should try to be more like Europe. And so after carving out Africa at the Berlin Convention, these powers believed that they were going to take their Western ideals and Western culture and Western language and throw it onto Africa, which in turn stripped Africans of their native tongue and their native clothing and their way of life before they were disturbed. One of the darker effects of imperialism is ethnic conflict. Now, most people, they hear about different African countries that are in civil war or that are just in the dumps, and they hear about it and they believe, oh, Africa, they're just crazy and they're this and that and they need to be tamed. But most people fail to realize that there is a reason why these African countries are in the state that they're in. In 1994, the Rwandan genocide, the Tutsis and the Hutus. Most people don't know that back when Germany had control of Rwanda, a lot of times they had this system of racism and segregation between the Tutsis and the Hutus, and often the Germans would cater more to Tutsis, which really wedged the Tutsis and the Hutus apart. About 30, not even 30, a few years after the end of imperialism, though its effect has never really ended. A few years after the official end of imperialism, we see
formal imperialism.
Exactly, we see and new imperialism. We see the Rwandan genocide, and most people think, oh, and I'm sure in 1994, the Americans and Europeans who were watching the genocide from the comfort of their homes were just like, oh, these Africans, they need to be tamed and they need somebody to come in and help. But they fail to realize that because of this systematic racism that the Germans put upon the Tutsis and the Hutus, it drove them apart. And so the Hutus finally gained control of Rwanda, and in 1994 killed 800,000 Tutsis in the span of 2 or 3 months, I believe. And a lot of people fail to realize where this type of stuff comes from. For instance, in the Congo, they're in civil war right now. A lot of people don't understand why they're in civil war or what's happening or why the M23 has control of the Congo, but it all stems back from imperialism. It stems back from pitting these countries against each other. It stems from ripping them out of their homes, forcing them to work, forcing them to find shelter in these gangs, in these groups, in these terrorist groups, forcing them to compete with Europeans for a way to live. We see in the Virunga State Park, which is home to the rare mountain gorillas in the Congo. The Congo is currently under the control of the M23, and the state park is struggling to stay open while there are powers that are coming in that are trying to mine in the park, though mining is illegal in the park, and that are trying to take away the livelihood of these people. And it just makes me sick that so many outsiders don't realize that Africa as a whole, the continent, did not choose to be the way that it is. And it certainly did not choose to be portrayed the way that it is. And so I feel like it is my duty on the show to be able to bring a different insight into stuff like this, because I know that once I first learned about the Rwandan genocide, it scared me. I thought, how could people be so cruel to each other? Then I realized people aren't naturally just that cruel to each other. There's some type of outside, interference, and I realized that that was Europe. That was people coming in and pitting these countries together. Oh, when I mentioned in the last segment that at the Berlin Convention there were no representatives from Africa there, when they were carving out what the countries, all these borders and whatnot, oftentimes they would separate ethnic groups and tribes that were allies that had similar like farming techniques or agricultural techniques. They would split up these countries and then put them, or they would make a new country or like a new colony with ethnic groups that didn't really get along with each other, that had different ways of life. For instance, with the Tutsis and the Hutus, I want to say that the Hutus tended to be more cattle herders and the Tutsis were more workers. And so Germans would often favor the Tutsis because this was during the Industrial Revolution, and they would put those people in the industries, while the Hutus were people who should have been around more cattle herders and should have been around people who had a similar, way of life as them. And all of these little things caused the major problems. Ethnic conflict is still going on in Africa. There are some conflicts that are still going on from the period of new imperialism. Like I mentioned with Rwanda, a lot of the Hutus who were killing Tutsis in Rwanda fled to the Congo. And now we see that the Congo is in civil war. And it's honestly just, it never ends. It's like the domino effect. You come in and you tip this domino, and then all these people are affected and they go on to affect other people, and it never ends. And so when people say that, European powers need to come in and tame Africans, or when Americans say that they need to be Americanized so that they're civilized and so that they can work together, it's not their fault. It is purely because people came into their home, stole land from them, and left them. They took the raw materials from Africa. They took so much gold, ivory, etc., stuff that they were originally trading, but Europe became greedy and they figured, I don't want to trade, this just should be mine. And so they came and they stole land, they stole culture, they stole resources, and they stole happiness. I mentioned in the last segment that new imperialism and the Industrial Revolution came pretty close after the end of the slave trade. These people were already being uprooted from their homes and shipped overseas to work for people who didn't care about them in the slightest. And now there's another form of slavery, but just from the comfort of their own homes. And that's not right. And I feel like a lot of countries, other continents failed Africa. We as Americans failed Africa because even in 1994 during the Rwandan genocide, it was televised. How did we allow that to go on for 2-3 months, allow 800,000 Tutsis to be slaughtered with clubs and machetes and be beheaded and kidnapped and recruited into all these militant groups? I feel like the country and our ignorance towards the problem honestly allowed a lot of this stuff to go on. And this is not the first instance of America letting something go on. And this is not the first instance of America turning a blind eye to colonialism. We see that with the natives. We took their land, started the reservation policy, and in reality uprooted them from their native lands, tried to Americanize them, and then just left them to